So, for episode 3, we speak with Justin Wickard, who is a track coach and speed specialist. And although he may not be as old as some of the veteran coaches that I'm speaking with on this podcast, he offers a unique perspective in that he's transitioning from working in a university environment and now working in the private sector. So, we get into some discussion around the challenges of making that transition, but also looking for ways to succeed. And as I found, wisdom doesn't always just come with age. It comes with experience, awareness, intelligence, and sometimes a little luck. So sit back and listen as I talk with Justin Wickard about his journey into the private sector and, to some degree, a bit of the unknown. So I think that's what kind of got me to this place where I'm like, okay, I could do like, okay, what exercises do you like? What books have you read? Kind of stuff, podcast. But I just want to find out, what is driving people with their own education now? What things are they looking at to get good information? And then how are they applying it in their everyday life and in their field, right? And I kind of look back at what I was doing. And it was really the really good stuff was like I traveled somewhere and I stayed there for a couple of weeks and I was immersed in whatever was being done.
Yeah.
That was like, okay, that's how you do it. And now, even now, when people ask me like, hey, what books have you read? I'm like, I don't know. Like none of those books have really helped. It was just like, even like we did some renovations here. And so I have all these bookcases and I have all my books. And I think it's more like an ego thing. Like I have all these books, right? So then I start pulling them down and I'm looking at them going, I've never really read through this entire book. Like, and so I started chucking stuff and then putting them in boxes and I put them away. And that was over the summer. And I haven't really felt the need to open up those boxes because it's not like I need those books. Like it's not like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh geez, I got a problem. Like you
Yeah.
open up the book. And so, not that everybody's so high on reading, and I think reading is good. It's like brain exercise, but certainly it's not like a reference tool. It's not like an Encyclopedia Britannica of training,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like those experiences, and the trial and error was more valuable. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I remember, I think it was a while ago, Joe Ken posted something about like, hey, this is great that you have all this book knowledge. You tell the younger kids it's great, but give me the practicality. Okay, that's great on the science, but can you do X, Y, and Z out on the floor? Because that's what matters, And when I listened to your last one with Ken, um, and Ryan, like I 100% agreed with everything that was taking place, especially at the beginning of social media and the nuances. I think even for myself and others, we can get so lost in let me read. There's so much more information out there. But then the best learning comes with, like you said, I went and saw so and so and sat there and learned for them and seen how they work. And you go back and like, wow, that was the best growth as a coach that I gained, not just from the reading, or it's like, hey, that out confirmed with some of the stuff I read. Cause I mean, it's great to have it on books, but now how are you going to apply it? And I think
yeah,
that's where a lot of people are struggle with. Like there's times I've reached out, like I think I've reached out to you on a couple of things that you're like, yeah, I don't don't believe in that. It's bull, and because it's just so much. You're like, okay, well, what's my theory? What's my philosophy? How am I going to plan things and put things that say, hey, this works good for the kids that I coach? And do I know it work, instead of going, well, this is the things I read, and so I'm just doing it just to do it.
yeah. So that's what I
Yeah.
want to dive into with you is, and I'm going to give you some time to tell us what you're doing now. Like that's where I want to start is like, what are you doing now? What are some of the things that you're working on right now? And then let's go back and let's talk about, okay, how did you get here? And now that you're here and you've gone through some things, what are some things you're looking forward ahead to, like, okay, this is where I got to strengthen some areas or I got to get better. And
Yeah.
I can share my thoughts too on that. But I
Yeah.
really, and how old are you at this point,
I
Justin?
am 38, so
Yeah.
I'm still young.
Yeah. You got lots going on there that you can,
Yeah.
but still 38, like if I look back to when I was 38, I'm, married. I had by 38, I had 2 kids, and I was working a university position, and I'm like, yeah, okay, well, but I was obviously immersed in everything, and so I
Hmm.
didn't really. I found that I wasn't really. I'm not going to say I wasn't learning as much, but certainly I was just so busy. Um, so
I
I
know what you're
think,
talking about.
and
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with that, but
No.
but let's focus in on you. Enough about me. What are you doing right now? What's your current position? Where are you at? And then we'll jump back and let's find out more
Yeah.
about you.
So I'm in the private sector now. So I guess sort of what you talked about. I spent 14 years as the Division One NCAA coach. Went to a lot of different universities. Spent 4 years as a volunteer coach just to get my foot into the door. And so I had mentors in regards of looking over programs and workouts. Um, but it wasn't really until I got connected with a program from USATF, which is called Emergent Elite. And I went out there, and that for me was, for my young career, was the game changer, because everything was, why are you doing this? What's the purpose? What's the science behind this? Like, you can't, if you want to win medals, you can't just say, oh, hey, I'm doing this. Like, explain why, what's the purpose? What's the reason? How's this going to help you in the end result of goals that you want to get? So for me, when that happened, that just was like, wow, this is amazing. And then as I was going through my time as a college coach, I would reach out to those that I trusted and stuff. I'm like, hey, what do you think of my workouts? These is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. This is my why. So I'm thinking, am I on the right track? Or am I totally off in left field and I need to change things up? So I relied on others, to get advice if I was stuck or something, or just wanted to have, hey, how your programming planning is correct. Like, I'm not seeing anything here that's alarming to make go, oh, you're doing something here that could have some issues. So I did a lot of that, but it's the same thing like you said earlier. I noticed that throughout the time, like, yeah, I wanted to go to maybe the coaches convention. The coaches conventions are great, but it's more of a social thing. There's not much true educational learning. You might take some nuggets here and there, but it still doesn't replace the experience of going somewhere, learning from someone, and then going, okay, you've seen this movement, this pattern. What do you think is going on? That's where the learning for me has taken place a lot. And, now leaving the college sector to do in the private and work with the youth and high school kids, it has made me look even more of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is the drills that I'm doing, is it effective or is it a waste? And just really more refined of me realizing, like, I need to get a better job of identifying movement patterns of why this is happening. Okay, well, hey, these are my checklists. All right, this is the things I need to do to improve this movement pattern, or do I not even mess with it? um, because I think at the college level and some things, it's just more like, hey, if I can get them to this point and score points and get this, then I'm doing okay, you know? And so for now, being in the private sector, and honestly, it's been crazy. It's allowed me to talk to people I've never talked with ever before, because I now have more time. I'm not recruiting. I'm not worrying about meets or getting other administrative tasks done. And it's just allowed me to do more of like what we're doing and reaching out to people and having conversations and stuff. I mean, like, I've known what Banta's work has been, and I follow him and seen his book and everything, but throughout my whole entire coach career, I never had a phone call with him. And
Mm.
finally this year I've had a phone call with him. you know, I've talked to more people over the phone than I ever have while I was coaching in college, just because. I was so focused on, I got to get recruiting, I got to get this done, I got to do this and stuff. And so that was the challenging part for sure.
Now, if we go back to the college environment, did you feel like there were people there that were helping you with, your learning and your development and actually encouraging you to step outside of that environment and seek others, or was it just something you did on your own?
It was something that I did on my own. Like they would, depending on the school I was at, they would say, "Hey, we have a financial place and sector where we can reimburse you for going to the conferences or going to a clinic." But again, it's usually when those clinics line up, it usually falls in with it's Christmas break
Mm,
or it is recruiting, the start of the recruiting cycle. So you're like, as a coach, you're torn because you're like, well, I want to do this, but I know at the end of the day, my job is to do this. So yeah, I'm hearing permission, but what do I want to give up? And so for me, a lot of times, like I wanted to, like there was a lot of times I wanted to go out to Altus when they were doing their in person, but it was during Christmas. And with me being fairly new and married, I'm like, I'm already spending so much time away from my wife and my kids. Now I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to go to Arizona and I'm going to spend a whole week there. It's going to be like, really? No, you're not. So then I choose like, well, I'm going to do what's, I'm going to stay home, you know? So that for me, that was the challenge. Yes, there was encouragement, but at the end of the day, it's like, I'm going to go recruit, then go do this.
yeah, and I think, I mean, even myself, when I worked in the college university environment, um, I ended up hosting events and conferences and things like that, so I could bring people in that I wanted to
That's awesome.
learn from, right? But it was a heck of a lot of work too,
Yep.
and the same sort of thing. Like if I was going to hold that on a weekend, you count on my wife not seeing me for probably 5 straight days, just
Yeah.
before and after and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was definitely a sacrifice, and it wasn't like the people that were my superiors were like encouraging that. They there wasn't anything. It was just kind of like, well, I could use it as a bit of a fundraiser and I can get, two birds with one stone,
Yep.
and I can get my professional development and also meet people within my local community who would come to the event. So that was a good way to network too. But yeah, it was just really fast and furious. And I'm like, okay, I did it. Um, but it wasn't like this formal process of, okay, as part of your professional development as an employee of ours, like we're gonna, help you do this. We're gonna give you a team of people to help you put it together. It was like all on my own. And if anything, sometimes I got grief for it, right? Because, I
Mhm.
couldn't help out a coach over here. Anyways,
Yeah.
but
Well, and I think for from my experience too in the college setting is there's so many great head coaches out there that have good intentions, but at the end of the day, yeah, they're mentoring, they're helping, but it might not be the actual kind of mentorship that maybe someone needs. Because at the end of the day, they're like, hey, your job is to win conferences or win nationals. And at the end of the day, my AD is not going to care how much I'm mentoring because if I'm not
yep,
getting the results done, I lose my job.
yeah,
So I think for me looking back, that would have been something that I would have in the interview process, I would have thought about more and like, okay, like I know these are the things I need to continue to grow. Will this head coach or the staff that's going to possibly around me going to be able to help me in that? Or is it like, hey, we trust you, go do your thing, and I'm not really growing, or they're not really, challenging me in a way to keep improving, but hindsight, lesson learned, now I'm
yeah.
doing that myself, outside of in the private sector.
Well, in the private sector, I mean, would you agree that there's like a whole set of soft skills that you didn't necessarily need? Well, I mean, it could have helped in a college setting, but it's not really part of that environment.
Yeah.
So now you have this, scenario where you're like, okay, I got to be the relationship builder. I've got to, network. I've got to make sure people are happy. I got to keep the business afloat. I've got to get cash flow. All these sorts of
Yep.
things, so it does make you more of a renaissance man versus what you were
Correct.
doing in college.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I mean, since I'm dealing with the youth and I'm doing it myself, a lot of areas here in Texas, and I don't know if it's like this in the country, but a lot of the club coaches have full-time jobs, here in the US. And so they're not so much worried about the club. Oh, I got to make money because this is how I feed my family. And so it is truly a passion for them. Like, hey, I'm here to help the kids. This is great. But now when I'm in a situation like, no, I'm doing this full time. I'm not getting a part-time job, and whatever I make, I'll wait till it grows to whatever. I think for me, that's where like, well, if I want to do this, if I don't continue to grow or educate myself, I feel like now I'm doing a disservice to those that are going to hire me to train their kids. Cause I'm like, if I'm expecting them to improve, to be better, then I need to be doing the exact same thing, So I have sort of put that onus on me now that I'm in the private sector, because if I don't have a regular full-time job, then I need to treat my own coaching development as part of the duties as of being a full-time person for my business.
Yeah, it's an investment.
Yep, exactly.
And so if we were to get you to describe like the types of clientele you have right now, and is it just isolated towards like track and maybe some speed sports, or is it a little more broad?
That's the thing. I'm still, because it's only been since August since I've been doing it. So it's still figuring out the network, and it's constantly evolving and changing. But right now, I would say it's a mixture between youth track kids and youth soccer kids
Mm,
and stuff. There's not really any high school. I have one high school senior that's going on to run college track in Texas, and that's about it right now. So it's just slowly word of mouth and stuff. And so honestly, for me, I'm sort of seeing it as, speed is important to every sport. And so if I can be a vehicle like what you do and others of like, hey, no matter what sport, I'll come and help you with your speed development and get you faster. So that's where I'm seeing with, my expertise in track and field with the hurdles and sprints, you know.
yeah, yeah. It seems like more people are trying to hurdle in the NFL right now,
Yeah.
at their peril. Um,
Yes.
but I mean, we were having this discussion too, on the weekend about like the Clemson program being cut, and is track and field like should I mean because of COVID and the restrictions on finances at the college level, are we going to see track programs being cut at the college level? And then what is the role of the private sector to kind of help out in those areas and keep the sport alive? Have you thought a bit about that lately?
Oh yeah, I've definitely have thought about that, and I think even just hearing from other coaches that are still that are coaching in the college sector. I mean, you have yours like, hey, if you're winning, you're doing things, you're not having to worry about it. Well, but then you sit there like, well, look at Clemson. They were winning, they were doing things, you know. And I think there's many people like, hey, look, Power Five is going to split. It's going to change the dynamics of things, and being around different, I think it all depends on the AD and the university, to be honest with you, because depending on how they view it and look at it, I know they say track does bring in revenue, but if the AD or the university president doesn't see that, and if that's are all driven about the revenue or certain look, then they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And unfortunately, I've always been told by others, if it doesn't have a ball in it, no one cares. Well, track and field doesn't have a ball in it besides shot put and the hammer, you know. So it's like, yeah. So it'll be interesting. I think, unfortunately, with Clemson, does it allow other universities, presidents, ADs to say, well, they were able to do it, and yeah, they got the pushback, but nothing's coming repercussion from it. So why should I be afraid? Yeah, you're gone. You
Yeah,
know.
and I hate to say it because I was a track athlete. I competed in university, had a great time, coached in university. But I kind of see, the way things are heading in terms of like, okay, well, who's generating revenue? Who do people want to go out and watch? Well, we haven't really had an Olympics, so that's a problem too, right? Because usually the Olympics were when everybody would go like, hey, track and field, right?
Yep,
And
yep,
now we're missing one. I don't know if it's going to happen, this
yeah,
summer, but on many levels, it's out of the limelight, and I think that is hurting its chances too at the collegiate level, and
yeah.
so I
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
and
really
I
tough
will.
situation.
Yeah, and I will say from that being inners, there's been many things I've sat back and just like shook my head of like we're not one voice in track and field. It's like each one has their own initiative or self motivation to help themselves out. When it's like, why can't we just come together and come up with something that works for everyone? And it's like you got the Power Five says, no, we want this. You got mid majors say, no, we want this. We're the majority, but Power Five's like, but we got the money.
Yep.
So, but there's no really truly one voice, one unit working together, say, let's do this. It's just so many egos or initiatives and objectives. And it's like, eventually, it's, if we don't get it together, in my opinion, it's going to hurt. I mean, that's like, right, the Olympics, besides saying, hey, we want the only way regular people can say, oh, who did well is the medal count. And at the end of the day, from a general person, they're like, okay, that's great, but who won?
Yeah, now my question to you is, as somebody who's in the private sector and sees themselves as an entrepreneur, I mean, what opportunities do you see for say track and field? Let's isolate it to track and field,
Yeah.
because if you set up a good environment and a club system or whatever you call it, um, people will want to do it, and if you market it properly. So how are you kind of dealing with that now?
Yeah. I think for one, it's just for me being truly who I am and what's my passion and the reason why I'm doing it. For me, it's more of I started doing my business because I'm like, I've seen so many kids come to the college sector burnt out, you know, been driven by the coach or the parents. And it's like, I want to bring back having fun, enjoying coming to practice. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I had 4 300s or whatever it may be. It stunk, but I had to do it. And to me, it's just bringing back the excitement of joy. And there's a lot of club coaches, high school coaches that do a great job of that. Um, but also seeing that, hey, if the NCAA does certain things different, like I think maybe at other places in other countries, like there is no college track team. Like you're right, you're in your own club. And how do you make money? How do you continue to do that to go to school and vice versa? And so I think depending on where it goes, like, yeah, I could possibly be one of those like, hey, this is a good service. This is a person that truly cares about the kids. It's not about making them look good. It's truly to help them and guide them and help them get to their best potential of level of talent possible and educating them along the process. Because yeah, reality could be maybe it's just Power Five that has track and field, and the rest of the university like, hey, you're a club and you got to
Yeah.
raise your own money and do your own things. And I think if set it up, that's where it could be now. Someone like myself or others that do that can be like, hey, I've been doing this club thing for X amount of years. I've raised this, I've done this. These are things I can do. Now I could be maybe an asset to this club track that's at X university.
Hmm.
And you can trust me in this because I've have experience. I've shown history of success, so that can definitely possibly lead in to something like that. Or, like as semi-professional professional at the US level, if you're not a certain standard, there is no second, grassroots of growing you up and trying to get you to be that next Olympian that gets that contract with Nike or Adidas. Like there's no farm in between. It's either you're there or you're not there. you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting model though that you bring up, is, and I've thought about this too, is like, okay, um as a university, if you think, okay, this sport is a financial burden to us, and even from an administrative point of view, if somebody said, well, I'll take it off your hands, but you guys got these facilities, and people want to be, people will go to your university and pay tuition, and we may have some financial assistance for them, but you'll handle that. You'll handle the recruiting, you'll handle the scheduling of competitions, you'll do the workouts, and you'll do fundraising. um, I think that's pretty attractive, especially if you've got a real flair for that. And do you think that that could possibly happen with a lot of these sports?
I think it could. I think it could. I think the big kicker, if I have to put it in like, hey, if I was like, ooh, this could be an opportunity to me, number one, being with the family, like, how am I going to get paid? You know, and knowing that I was in the college sector, if you're doing it in the club, what is the demands of that club, of what they got to be successful, to have it keep going, to represent, the university well. And if it's certain standards, then you go, well, then am I going to have to do this full time? Or is this just a part time thing where I show up, do the things I need to do at the club, and you figure traveling. So to me, I'm like, okay, am I going to have to raise my own salary now? And stuff, sort of like what I'm doing now, basically in the private sector, is the clients is what brings my salary in.
Hmm.
So I think it just also depends for me of it's a great opportunity, but the reward of what do I want for myself and my family, and what's important, and is it worth it or not worth it? I think that's what people, if it does happen, that's what's going to be the next biggest object, hurdle to look at.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, that's what we've been talking about this last week, was just the financial realities of everything. And if you're going to do it, one, it's got to be stable, and there's got to be a future.
Yep.
And I don't think anybody's afraid of hard work.
No.
But yeah, having some certainty around it. And I even thought, I was talking to somebody else who's in Los Angeles, and he was thinking of like, okay, start up a little track club. And I'm like, okay, but don't try to do every event. Like, maybe you just do the 1, 2, 4 and the hurdles, and that's it. Like, even the hurdles, like, you got to bring out hurdles, right? But
Yep.
um, do you think there could be any specialization by schools where they're like, these are the only events we're going to do? We're going to do all the throws, or we're just going to do cross country, or we're just going to do sprints. Like, have you
Oh,
thought
I
about
think
that?
that can totally happen and stuff, because it depends. Like the one school I was at, it cost like 55,000 dollars to go to school there. So, you know, we basically were like, hey, we're a sprint dominant program, so therefore our objective is this nationally. There's others that are going to be like, hey, look, we've been nationally ranked cross country, track and field not so much, so we're putting all our eggs in cross country. I definitely think that can happen for sure at the college level. I mean, again, it's as a AD or a president, if I hear them like, oh, it's just going to be this group, well, guess what? Now there's things that maybe I don't have to worry as much. I'm like, okay, it's not going to be in my hair. I don't have to, you know, it's not going to be a big deal. And it's just only a select number of kids, like 20 kids. Like,
Yeah.
and if they're not causing any problems or anything, go at it.
Yeah. It's manageable. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, I mean, have you looked at any sort of entrepreneurial, sort of educational things, or have anybody that you looked at as a mentor to go like, okay, this is where I'm at now. Is there anybody out there that can help you move all of this forward, that you found, like, in
Yeah.
terms of
So,
looking at it as an entrepreneur and a private
yeah,
sector
so
person?
I've reached out to quite a few, that have done the club part of track and field. One's in Houston. You probably have seen it. It's Will Collins, Fast University. I've like, hey, what have you done? Another guy, MVP out in Charlotte. He's done great things and gave me some advice and input. And I'll be honest, I even reached out to Les there in San Diego with the stuff that he's been doing. It's like, how you been going about doing this? And a couple other people. So yeah, I've definitely, because one thing I've realized is, it's like for yourself, like, okay, if this is my career, my job, what are the different revenue streams of income that I can generate to help support my family? And it's not to, I'm doing it to try to win at something or get self gain. It's like, this is reality. Like, what things can I do well and provide a good service to help generate income? Is that the online stuff, like for you that you've started and stuff? It's like, hey, if I can generate my online income to a certain amount, yeah, now I can spend more time with my family and do these things that are important to us as a unit. And so, yeah, I'm definitely exploring all those factors. And I think for me, since it's so new, I have concepts, but it's always going to be changing, especially for the first probably year. But as actually like a true game plan of going, hey, these are things that's worked. These are the things that I would recommend. There's a few, but I'll be honest with you, hasn't been one like, yes, this is the person that I fully can trust from a mentor standpoint to help guide me through maybe on a monthly basis to say, these are good ideas you're thinking. Have you thought about this? Oh, I've tried these things in the private sector, and I would stay clear from these things because those are mistakes that you don't want to make.
Yeah, and you may have to blaze the trail, right? And do a little bit of trial and error as part of that. I know just from my own sort of different activities and ventures and stuff like that. I've been trying to feel it out, and even like the fitness community has been interesting. Like when you start talking about sprinting for fitness, there's a lot of receptive people out there,
Yep.
and then aside from that, then there's like sort of that middle-aged masters community and even older. Like I've had people like in their 70s say like, I want to do track and field. I did it when I was in high school and I want to do it again now that I'm retired and I have
Hmm.
some money. So there's all sorts of directions you can go with it, and I think you may want to try all of them to some extent, at least
Correct.
from your revenue model. But um, I think there's a lot of opportunities for what you're doing.
Yeah. No, I think so too. It's just like you said, it's finding that niche that I feel that works well for me and for, the kind of dynamics that I'm wanting to create for my family and supporting the overall things that's important to us from a value standpoint.
Yeah, like some sort of, I mean, you almost have to have like a diversification plan where you're
Yep.
like, okay, this is, I'm going to focus this much time on, youth, and then I'm going to focus this much time on online education consultations, and then this much time on general fitness masters, and then maybe there's a group where it's not just youth, but it's people trying to get those scholarships and trying to get noticed and get a level of service from you to get that scholarship or
Yep.
whatever it might be. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would say one thing that I've realized in just in the private sector is interesting is, when I left the college sector, I thought like being 14 years as a Division 1 coach would sort of help with like clients. Parents have no idea. They do not care. No, no, they're just like, what's the price? And
Yeah,
then they go, yeah, that's no. And I'm like, you want me to go cheaper than this? Like, this is already cheap. Like, and I did my market analysis like compared to everyone else. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not budging. I can't, you know?
well, do you have any friends who are swim coaches?
I do not.
You got to get some swim coach friends, because that's an entirely different, well, it's not an entirely different model. It's an individual sport. They have a huge facility demand in terms of like, like, okay, we need a pool and that's expensive. And how do we do that? But I remember I was teaching some courses in Canada here, some national certification courses for coaches. And the swim coaches all had a swagger to them. Like, yeah, this is what we get paid, and this is how much we charge, and we pay like $1 million a year in pool fees, and and this is what we charge, right?
Yeah.
um and so obviously they marketed towards people who could afford it, but it was never, finances were never an issue. There was always demand for kids being in swim programs, and
Wow.
pay. How much does it cost? Well, this is how much our coaching costs, this is how much the pool fees cost, this is how much the competition travel, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's something to be learned there, and maybe track and field has kind of sold itself a bit short because you could run anywhere, right?
Yeah.
We got a
And they
dirt
have
track.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they have, to be honest with you, that's one thing where I'm like, for my own starting is, clubs track around here. It's like for a fee of like $200 to $300 for the whole entire club season plus uniform. That's the cost. That's
Yes.
it. So people are like, well, I'm just gonna, why is this? And I'm like, but some people are like, I'm not liking the attention I get from the club, or they don't have a hurdles coach, and I'm like, I'm not getting any specific skill working on sprint form mechanics, like, and I'm like, but then they see the price and like, uh, but why? But then I find out in like soccer and club gymnastics and club like um
Yeah.
volleyball, it's like 4 to 5 grand for just that
Yes.
time. I'm like, but yeah, and that's, I agree with you. I think track and field, just like sort of like strength and conditioning, like we expect things for free and we want quality, but then we're gonna gripe when it's a price now. Be like, whoa, you're charging? Like, how dare you
Yeah.
charge?
You gotta groom your customers almost, right? And your audience, and
Yep.
there's an education process. Um, and maybe that is part of the marketing pitch is like, okay, this is what other sports are paying. This is the level of coaching we provide. This is something that will last, for their lifetime in terms of their ability to move and
Yeah.
maintain their fitness and all that. So yeah, it's very interesting. And um whenever I see, and I again, I have my kids run track and all that too, and I kind of see what's happening, and um, the track people selling themselves short, and I almost try to distance myself from that because I
Mhm.
I, I can see it happening that, like you said, if I'm charging say $500 a month, there's always going to be somebody doing it for $100 a month,
Yep. Yep.
right?
But they got a
And
full-time job on the side. You're like, well, of course they can
yeah,
save
yeah.
$100.
And you see what kind of service they're delivering in quality, but nobody else sees it. So it's yeah, we really got to raise the bar in that regard for the sport.
Yeah. No, for sure. And as you know, that's gonna take time.
It is, but I think this is kind of the perfect time for that, like in terms of trying something new, developing something new, like, hey, track's a really easy social distancing sport.
Yep.
And there's all sorts of things you can pull from it, right? So um I the one thing is funny is like on my YouTube feed, like I'll log in and for some reason I'm getting all these meets that they're having in Europe. They're just being thrown into my feed somehow, and it's like, oh look, they're having all these meets during COVID, and they have some sort of rules around it. But I've been watching more track meets than ever before at
Mhm.
all levels. It would be like, oh, this is the under 18 group from Poland. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Like, let's watch
Yeah.
this, right? So I think there's a market out there. There's like this latent demand for it that people don't know about yet. So I think you got to really
Yeah.
look into that.
Yeah. Well, and especially you think of the whole COVID thing, like when kids couldn't go run at their high school, they couldn't have a form unit of practice. Well, who do you think they were going to? They were going to their club coaches, because they were like, hey, we'll just go find somewhere and just so we can keep training. So I think from the COVID standpoint, I think that's another reality of like, man, like there's so much importance to club track programs or club coaches or private coaches, because you're realizing like, man, if it wasn't for them there, those kids at the high school or maybe even college, they're literally not doing anything. They're
Hmm.
by themselves at all. There's no one to watch them or to give them feedback. And I think that's where the connection can be better of college or whatever, saying, hey, these are the workouts. And now that club coach that can be trusted with those kids are saying, okay, I'm monitoring them. Yeah, I'm not going back to that college coach because I can't, because NCAA rules. But nonetheless, they can know, like the NFL, right? There's NFL, they don't stay with this main strength and conditioning coach all the time. They go to certain private sectors. Someone, you do it yourself.
Yep.
And it's like, why? Well, because I know I can trust Derek. I can trust this person because they're not going to come back to this program hurt and injured. I know they're going to be okay. They're not going to do anything crazy. We've talked on the phone. I can say, yes, go to that guy. you know?
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Like even um I mean, even during the lockdowns and all that, I had people contact me about, okay, I'm going to be going to this school, and I want to make sure I'm in shape for when the season starts. And I'm sure there's lots of scenarios like that, especially now. But somebody who wants to have a good showing when they join the track team, and they want some private help for that.
Yeah.
So there's so many possibilities there, and I think again, people were used to just doing track in high school, and who knows what the coaching was like, and the level of coaching, the attention. Like even when I think one of the reasons I got into coaching was I look back and I'm like, man, nobody taught me anything. Like we just kind of they made me run, and I went to track meets and I got faster every year because I was growing. But there might be a few little things that I pulled from that experience, but it wasn't like this great educational experience. It was just go do it. And I could probably say that about all the sports I did. Like I might have had one or two really good coaches who actually taught us
Hmm.
as part of the whole process, as opposed to just like go do these workouts, or just throw the ball at you and go play the sport and yell at you and scream at you. But there's certainly a place for that education that you talked about as part of the coaching process, and growing the individual as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know like for yourself, you started doing it. Jonas is doing it. He came across it not intentionally, but realized that there's demand. But I really think for me, like Altus has done it to some degree. But I really think the more the education and learning is more going back to what you experienced when you were with Charlie.
Yeah.
It's truly tutorial, and she sat there like, why are you seeing this? What's the reason why? You were really being challenged, and probably made you think, well,
Yeah,
what's
like and
the
like you said
reason?
before, it wasn't always at the track. It was like, okay, let's go grab a coffee, or let's go, whatever,
Correct.
the drive to the track or the drive from the track, or where you had some time to digest things, and then have a conversation around it. And um but that was certainly an immersive experience that I think it's hard to do obviously right now. But
Yep.
even if like for online, and I don't know how much online stuff you're doing right now, but I'm trying to use Zoom and use
Yep.
chats and use whatever texts, and just video back and forth. And I found that there's some value, and
Oh yeah.
there's that interaction, and it may not seem as like a normal sort of face to face, but there's value in that sort of, you send something and then that person digests it, and then they send it back, and you have some time to really look at it and think it out. Have you
Yeah.
had that experience too?
Not recently. That's something that for me, I've been exploring. Like I know when I reached out to you, that's like, hey, like I'll do whatever, like, to have that dialogue and stuff. And, I know Jonas has mentioned that and stuff. And I think that's where from the track and field world, because we have sold ourselves so short on things, people like think like, oh, well, that's, free,
Yeah.
well, then you realize like, well, if you treat it like free, is the commitment really going to be there? Or it's like, oh, it's just one or two call and then that's it. But now if you're paying someone that you see as a mentor, that you want to be mentored, now you're saying, hey, I'm committing to this. I'm valuing your time, your expertise, what I'm wanting from you, and I want to learn. So I'm in this, not just like, will you do this? Can you think you can help me? And then it just after maybe one call, two calls, that's it. you
Yeah.
know I think that's what the Zoom, the online stuff is sort of, to me, is revealing to me. I mean, I know like Carl mentioned, I mean, come on, before COVID, you were the one that was doing the Zoom stuff, right? And
Yeah.
having the sort of the conversation, but yet it wasn't really. And then all of a sudden people caught on, and and realized. And I think for like one of my friends, he was shocked. He did sort of a educational piece on hurdles, and he was shocked. Like he charged $25 and he was shocked. He was like, wow, like I made money more than my salary. Like this is crazy. Like whoever thought? But I think it's just opening up so many things to people like, I got to do this.
Yeah, like even I was just thinking for yourself, like the course platform that I use is very interesting because there's different ways that you can do it. Like obviously they finish one section, they move on to the next. Or I had one option where it was called a drip, where it would drop a workout every week. And then, on the, say on the Friday, so they could get it ready for the Monday, and you could just sort of drip information. And I'm like, oh, this would be good for just coaching or rehab or so the
Hmm.
technology. And then like I said, if somebody could, send me a text or a video of their performance at that practice. Now it's being really good. There's some people who send it to me between their reps. So they'll do a rep and then they'll send a video, and I'm like, okay, do this, do this, do this. And then so some people are really good. So you just have to find the right tech geeks to be your customers. But
Yeah,
it is catching up to a point where this online coaching thing is viable, especially if the person has the self motivation to go out and do it and do the workouts and
correct.
all that. But it's
Yeah,
and teaching them how I want them to shoot the video with their phone, and what resolution, and then send it to me so it gets here quick. Like all those things 5 years ago would be a non-starter, but now it's like, okay, everybody's getting technologically smarter, and there's just a need for it. So I think it's not a
yeah.
bad, jumping
No,
on
I
point.
think, and I think for me, it's been intriguing. I've had one bout of like, online training, which is, totally different. You want to be challenged from a coaching standpoint, as that's totally different. You got to think ahead of the game, think of what could happen, scenarios, all that stuff. Communication has to be so much better,
Yes.
big time. But for me, it's like when I've done it, I realize like, it's like my wife would say, she's like, if I don't set parameters of when I do it, I can be on my phone all day,
Yeah.
responding instantly. Oh, I got to respond back. And she's like, you need to, these are the windows, this is what you do. And as a coach, being face to face, that was a struggle for me. It still is at times, because I'm like, but they respond like, I gotta get back to them, especially if they're at the track. I'm like, well, I'm with my kid, or I can't. And then they're like, well, I was done with my practice already an hour ago. you know. So for me, I think that part in the new realm has been also, a challenge as well, and when it comes to the private sector.
Yeah, and that time management piece is huge, and I think from a digital perspective, it's probably easier to kind of schedule yourself. And like I said, even with like some of the stuff that I'm using now, I'll just send them a whole bunch of stuff that I prepared, and every client will get it, so they all know like the warm up sequence. They all know the when we first start doing starting blocks, like this is the sequence I want you to go through. And rather than me having to do it through a Zoom session where it takes my time, it's already everybody has to learn the same thing anyways. So
Yep.
here's my how to, and everybody gets that. And then when a real issue comes up, okay, let's jump on a call and let's solve it.
Yeah.
So, but that took me a while, because I'm like you, I'm like, I got to be able to solve it in person, because that's the
Yep.
quality of coaching I'm going to
Yep.
deliver. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get over myself here. And
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, as you know, from for me, it's even more challenge. Like, oh, now I got to break it down even more. Now it makes you look like, am I really doing the progressions correctly, or am I just doing something because I've always done this? Because now there is no face to face interaction. It's like you can show a video, but then they're like, yeah, I'm not getting this
yeah.
you know so definitely, that's definitely a challenge when it comes to the online. And I know that takes time and trial and error and putting together things and stuff, because for me, it's like, I don't want to get to a point of like, yeah, I'm putting together the stuff, but it's not a cookie cutter thing, like, oh well,
Yes.
everyone does this. You still got to tailor it to make it specific to that person to help them, which then takes a little bit more energy. But there's so many, I think, even before COVID, of those online programs. Oh, hey, do X, Y, and Z, or jump higher vertical. Well, you're not getting, it's just, here it is, and good luck to you.
The
you
vertical
know,
jump programs are notorious for that, aren't they?
exactly. get get more powerful in 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And I'll be honest, like the two that I've done for the online program, it was sort of that, like, if like, here's a 8-week speed development program, here's the steps, and you go through it. There was no like, hey, what are the things you personally need, what are you looking for? It's like, hey, like, these are the basics, like, if you do these basics, you can't go wrong. But yet at the same time, there's no that personal touch. It's just like, here's your program.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I'm getting some of those right now. The people want the combine program, like, oh, I got to get ready for my combine or my pro day and all that. And I'm like, okay, well, I could send you a progression, but do you have access to a track? Do you have access to a weight room? Do you, all when is that combine going to be scheduled? Because nobody knows. We don't even know if the NFL combine is going to happen as it
Yep.
used to, right? So
Hmm.
the timelines may be different, the venues may be different, and so I'm trying to figure all this out before I get somebody to commit because
Yeah.
I just don't know. Like
Yeah. Yeah, and especially on that level, I mean, if I was in your shoes, I'm sitting there going, okay, if an agent's bringing me to this kid, this is a possibly $1 million contract kid. I don't know their movement patterns. Hard to see. I don't want to do something like, oh yeah, this guy, and as you know, we've done this. The kids will be quick to praise, but then they'll be quick to backing up the semi truck, and you're like, what? And they're like, I'm gonna blame you. You're like, well, you
Yeah.
did these things. So yeah, that I would, yeah, that's definitely a thing. I'd be like, how am I gonna do this?
Yeah, and there's probably more questions than answers right now, but I think that's fine. I think
Yep.
it's going to separate the men from the boys per se, and like anything, any kind of stress or any change is really going to differentiate people. So I think it's interesting to kind of follow what you're doing, and I'll be really interested to see over 2021 how things develop for you.
Yeah. No, I'm interested myself. So, I know it's right now it's the word of mouth. And, I had one person that was doing gymnastics 3 times a week. And I was like, hey, look, to protect them from overtraining stuff, focus on gymnastics. When April's done and you're finished, come talk to me. And again, there's a lot of people that be like, oh yeah, sure, just one time a week one. I'm like, they're doing gymnastics 3, they're getting in their power, they're getting their
Yep.
acceleration, like they're just missing the longer stuff that they need to stabilize what their 200 event. So you're getting stuff in it, we can fix it. Focus on your gymnastics, come back in April when you're done.
Yeah.
you know
No,
and I,
you're right. You're right. And that's a really good approach. Whereas somebody who's a little more overzealous would say, like, yeah, come train with me too, and we'll just beat the hell out of you and I'll take your money.
yeah, yeah, like there was a couple, like I had a client was young kid, not only 10 years old, did 7 soccer games in a weekend. And they were supposed to train with me on Tuesday. And then I was like, hey, we just got back from, weekend trip tournaments. And I was like, here's a general circuit that he can do at home if you want to. I don't need to see you on Tuesday. Let him be a kid. Let him go have fun. And
Yeah,
he was like, oh, thanks, appreciate it. I'm like, yeah,
that's crazy.
you know. So, I'm hoping those kind of things, people will see it pay off, like, oh, that's a little bit different from what other people are. It's like, oh yeah, just come train. It's like, no, I'm thinking more longevity for these kids and what their well-being.
Awesome. That's good to hear. So if somebody's trying to find you, website, Instagram, social media handles, what's the best way
Yeah.
to find your stuff, Justin?
So for Twitter, it would be at tier one athlete. And then Instagram, it's at tier one athlete with an underscore at the end. They can find me on Facebook on my personal Facebook profile, just Justin Wickard. And website, I'm still working through that.
That's
So
well, I have a bunch of websites and I'm like, I don't think people visit them. I think they just go through like the social media. I don't, I mean, obviously you have to have it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's not the same currency as some of the
correct.
social
So
media
like
stuff.
for the audience that's gonna listen to this, like if they go to that website, they're just gonna see my in person training here in Texas. Like they're gonna be like, what's this?
Yeah, I visited. I'm like, what? There's no information.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what? So yeah, so those are the things. And I appreciate you doing this and seeing me worthy enough to be on your podcast. And I've always respected the things you've done. And even when I was in college coaching, looked up to your things that you've done, and your tutelage and experience. So I appreciate it as well.
Yeah, well, I've been seeing the stuff you're posting, and obviously it's you're posting intelligent stuff, common sense stuff, and stuff that I definitely agree with. So I thought, okay, when I first started the podcast, I wanted to get sort of like the older coaches on and what wisdom can they pass on. I'm like, well, we can learn from everybody. So I want to get some people who are, sort of in that intermediate level too, and maybe even some younger people, and say, okay, well, what are some of the things that you're dealing with? Because
Yeah.
they're all teachables,
Yeah.
right? And even your specific story about going into the private sector, and a lot of people will think, wow, that's really risky or that's scary, and which it is, but
Especially during a COVID.
yeah, yeah, your timing is impeccable. But certainly, Justin, I think there's a lot that people can take from that, and that experience, and going, okay, he's doing that, and okay, I have some options. Because I think, probably for both of us, when we were working for a university, you're like, well, I guess I'm going to be working in this environment for the rest of my life, because it's a very specific skill set to some degree,
Yep.
right? So there's
Yep.
some insecurity of like, okay, if I go outside of that, am I going to be a functioning human being?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I thought it was very appropriate to get you on, and
Well,
start.
I appreciate it, and I've always told others that I look up and respect. If there's anything that you see posted, you're more than welcome. Like, I got to check you. Let's because as you know, social media, Twitter, there's so much stuff out there. And you're like, what the heck? So I'm like, hey, I have no problem. Like, yeah, hey, Carl's called me a couple times. Like, hey, I'm like, okay, appreciate it. All right, so because at the end of the day, it's about providing good quality educational content for anyone and everyone that wants to learn.
Yeah, and everybody's opinion is valuable, like
Exactly.
even the bad ones, right?
Yes.
Um, but that's part of the learning process, and I think
Yep.
that's our primary means of communicating right now, because we can't do
Yep.
the face to face, and maybe
Exactly.
some of the things that we would do face to face we wouldn't normally do online, and now it's whatever. I try to have fun with it, and I try not to take it too seriously,
Yep.
whereas some people might take it a little more seriously. But
Yeah. And then also too, just a side note, if when you ever talk to him, tell Mark I say hello.
yes, definitely.
So he's
And
he's a great guy, and he influenced me a lot when he was at Utah State.
awesome. Yeah, I always hear that. There's a bunch of guys out there that I've met who have said the same thing, and that seems to be the epicenter, whether it was
Yep.
Utah State or Arizona State. So
Yep. Yep. Or
um,
Utah. Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
so but yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
and I hope to make it back to Texas soon and safely enough. And my good friend Nikki Kirk is a chiropractor at the chiropractic university out there, Parker.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
my sister went to school there.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So
okay.
another person you can connect with, I'll get Nikki on here as well,
Okay.
but I'll probably be in the Plano Frisco area at some point. And
I live in Frisco, so
yeah,
yeah.
so if I get back to the Andrews Institute there, the children's hospital there,
Yeah.
then we'll definitely connect and
Yeah,
grab
and
something to eat.
I would love it, and I can tell you if that happens, dinner and stuff is on me anyway. So
We'll figure it out. We'll
yeah,
figure it out.
yeah.
But certainly, thanks for taking the time and jumping on. I know you're busy, and if you ever need any help with anything, let me know.
Okay, I appreciate it, Derek. You have a good evening. Thank you.
Awesome.